Hello and welcome back to the Stacey West YouTube channel. Today I am looking ahead to yet another game. This week we are looking ahead to Blackpool at home on Saturday. So looking ahead to that game, I am joined by the one and only Tom from the It's Not Orange podcast. How are you doing, Tom?
Yeah, I'm very well. I'm anticipating a fairly good game on Saturday despite our recent results.
Well, I am also hoping it's going to be a good game, as long as it's a better game for us than it is for you. You kind of mentioned their recent results, so I guess we'll dive straight in. How's the season been going so far?
I think the overriding emotion is frustration. I think we've got the personnel to be a lot better than we are. So with the way we set up, I think it's blunted us a little bit in terms of the way it's been executed and the personnel we have in there. We expected a few more after the first two results, obviously beating Burton and beating Derby in the Cup with about 6 or 7 changes. Mm-hmm. And the last 3 games have been 0-0. Exeter was a good draw for me. Port Vale was a frustrating performance at home. We should have done a lot better. And Leyton Orient, once again, we had minimal chances, which I think grew the frustration when they had fairly good chances themselves and we could have lost the game. So not the start we wanted. I think we trust the fact that Critchley got us up before, as you know, and I just think it needs a bit more pizzazz, so to speak, and confidence in the team.
That's fair enough. I guess this early on in the season, it doesn't matter how strong of a team you are. These sorts of things can very much happen, and it may just be a bit of a blip. Who knows that you guys are going through? You obviously mentioned 3 0-0 draws on the bounce, and then a 2-0 victory in the first league game. So not conceded in the league, is that? You obviously spoke about it. It's actually quite kind of negative and frustrating at the minute, but is that not quite a solid positive to look at? Or is it the fact the size that you've come up against just simply aren't creating enough against what is actually quite a weak Blackpool defence?
The defence isn't weak, and actually teams have created enough chance against us. It's actually the quality of the finishing which has let those teams down. Port Vale had a fairly easy chance 2 easy chances actually. One in the first half, on the second half, where they were through on goal. Burton in the 2-0 victory, and Marv's lost the ball centre back, and they literally nicked it off him and were through on goal. I think it was actually quite a good save in the end. Leyton Orient passed the ball across goal a couple of times, should have had a penalty, had a header excellently saved as well. So we've actually conceded about 6 or 7 clear-cut chances, if you believe in stats, but goals that should have been scored. And if it wasn't through poor execution, then we would have lost both to Leyton Orient and Port Vale, in my humble opinion. And we're not creating enough chances to counter that, and that's where I think the frustration lies. Defence quality wise, in terms of the ability of Ollie Casey, Dan Grimshaw's an absolutely incredible keeper at this level.
Yeah.
Stephen Husband has grown really well, should I say, in the last 2 league games as well, and getting involved a lot more and showing his experience. It's just we are conceding chances regardless, like any football club does. It's just we've not conceded yet.
So I guess kind of flipping the pitch then, kind of go from defence to attack. Obviously, you've said that you're not creating that many chances. Is it the fact that the ball is getting into the strikers and they're not doing enough with it? Is it the fact that they're having to do most of the work? So I'm just kind of going to mention something that I was going to ask you later on, but I'm right in saying that you set up in a 3-5-2, 5-3-2 kind of situation, don't you? Are those 2 strikers quite isolated up front to the point where when they get the ball, they're actually still quite far from goal and have to do a lot of work themselves? Or is it just the fact that the ball isn't even getting up to them?
A mixture of a few things, actually. I think we don't need to play 5-3-2, 3-5-2, as you've alluded to. At home, I'm not going to use the phrase teams like Leyton Orient, but the quality of our team versus the others, we should be winning those games, and therefore we shouldn't have that additional man in defence, and we should structure the midfield a bit better. So the midfield are getting lost a little bit with Ollie Norburn sitting as a central defensive midfielder. He recovers the ball excellently well, but then there's no outlay for him because the other 2 centre midfielders have actually joined quite wide with the wing backs, which is frustrating. The wing backs are therefore not attacking down the space and haven't had that confidence this season. And then Lavery is feeding off scraps, 23 touches last game. after being so good in pre-season and us getting the ball into him. He hasn't had that strike partner that's dominant and in Jake Beasley, who wins the fair few headers, but he's not smart up front. And it's a bit of him being isolated and us not creating clear-cut opportunities. He's had decent shots, and he did against Leyton Orient, but we're not building very well when we have the ball. 30 long balls last game when Critchley wants to play possession-based football just adds to the fact of we're frustrated because we're not moving the ball through the thirds and creating chances in behind for Lavery or crossing the ball into Beasley to actually, attempt to threaten.
So it's interesting you kind of pick up on the midfield there, because that was, funnily enough, the next thing I was going to ask. Your midfield consists of players that actually Lincoln fans will have heard of, or not necessarily your starting midfield, but your midfield options. So first of all, if we just pick up on Matty Virtue, a player who obviously Lincoln had on loan last season, a player who a lot of Lincoln fans maybe hoped, wrongly, it was never going to happen, but kind of hoped that you guys wouldn't trigger the contract extension and would maybe be a Lincoln player this season on a free. It was obviously never going to happen, especially when you came down. Is he somebody who you're expecting to play many minutes in your midfield this season, or is he somebody who's simply a squad option?
I'm not expecting him to play. Critchley likes him. He gave him that contract when he was injured. Put faith in him that way, and he is a fan of him. I like him. The problem with Matty Virtue is he doesn't start games at the moment, and he's coming on with 15 minutes to go, and therefore we can't impact the game as the way he wants to. Yeah. He had an excellent chance against Exeter when the ball was played through to him. Bit of a heavy pass. He could have hit it first time. Took that touch, keeper smothered it, and lo and behold, it's a fairly good save. But I wouldn't be disappointed if he started versus what we're used to at the moment. It's a difficult one. He's a conundrum. I don't know if he'll even be here come the end of the window, to be fair, because if he's not started for the first 4 or 5 league games, 4 or 5 games, then where does potentially Critchley see him if he's consistently playing the same sort of system? So I would absolutely have him as a squad player, and I'd absolutely have him as a backup when things aren't going well. Whether he will be here is another question, and whether we bring in someone to replace him, I don't know. But it's a difficult one because he did have a good season with you guys, didn't he? And he was quite a leader in that midfield. So I don't know. It's a hard one for me because he's been injured, and then he looked good in League One last spell with Critchley, scored some decent goals. I don't know. I'd like to see him play more minutes. I just don't know where he's going to lie this season come the end of the window.
That's fair enough. He was absolutely brilliant for us last season. Before we got Ethan Arahan in the summer, in the January window, he was one of, if not one of our best players. Genuinely brilliant leader in midfield. So obviously it was a shame when he did get injured. He pulled up almost right in front of me where I was sat. I remember when he pulled his hamstring. Can't remember exactly which game it was now. It was over the winter period. That one was a really big shame. But I kind of want to pick up on, funnily enough, 2 other midfielders. It's just the way it's fallen. Kenny Dougal is somebody who Lincoln fans will have in their nightmares. If I'm not mistaken, he scored both of the goals against us at Wembley in the playoff final. 2 goals that potentially Alex Palmer should have saved, but that's a topic for 3 years ago. 2 years ago now. Is he still a big part of your midfield, or slightly less so now?
I'd like to see him bigger parts. He started against Port Vale to give us that extra sort of bite in midfield in terms of not losing shape, like I've alluded to with the 2 other centre midfielders away from Norburn being wide. Why that happens, I don't know. I like him. I don't know why I like him as much. Maybe it is the affiliation with the playoffs, but previous to that, he had an excellent partnership with Grant Waters at Bristol Rovers. And when he is in his form, he is a very decent breaker up of play, and I don't want to lose him this season, nor do I think he'll go. But he's not a starter for Critchley at the moment, and like Critchley's alluded to, what starts at the moment is definitely not going to start in the next 5 or 6 weeks. So, again, someone who I wouldn't mind seeing in there, but it's all down to the manager at the end of the day. I still think he's got the attributes at League One level to be a really important player for us.
Yeah, fair enough. Yeah, it's somebody who I kind of hope we don't see on Saturday, from a bit of a selfish point of view, considering what happened last time.
It's the way we set up. So he suits, in my opinion, playing as a defensive midfielder and with a progressive attacker next to him, maybe looking a 4-4-2 or 4-2-3-1. But because we don't set up in that way, he gets lost a little bit in a midfield three if he's exposed by himself because he hasn't got that pace. But if he's playing next to a player and they both break up play and someone ahead of them like Jensen Weir, as an example, can freely attack, I think they'll work really well together. But that's just we're going to see how Critchley sort of lines up on Saturday, I suppose.
Well, speaking of another option that you've got and that you've actually very recently brought in, back end of last week, I do believe now. What was it, earlier this week? I can't remember exactly. Is Tashan Oakley-Booth, and it kind of then begs the question of a whole kind of transfer recruitment policy. Obviously, Tashan, you will have seen many comments on social media from Lincoln fans. Tashan did not have a very good time with us. I'm not saying that there isn't a player in there, but he definitely didn't show really any of it last season. There was only very short spells in particular games where he looked at all lively. So I guess it's kind of a question on your transfer recruitment policy as well. You mentioned that you're still a few signings away from having a full squad. Are you hoping for signings of a higher pedigree than Tashan?
Yeah, Tashan came as a massive surprise for me in a sense of I've spoke to Gary and I spoke to Ryan, and you've already alluded to that he wasn't the player that he maybe promised to be with his previous experiences, and he really played a few games for us. And he played one friendly with us against Hibernian, and he looked a fairly solid player. Played the ball through the middle, worked fairly hard. Critchley likes to develop talent, and why he signed him, I don't know. Bear in mind we've signed Norburn, Pennington, and a few others that have Jensen Weir, who really are good League One signings. It's a surprise. It's low risk to some extent, but it also poses a question where Virtue and Dougal are going to sit, as I've alluded to, if he's signing him. So I'd like to see a player come out of there. Obviously, he's signed for Blackpool on a 2-year deal, so it's not just a throwaway plus an option of another year. So I think we've committed to this guy. He won't be expensive, and Critchley hopefully gets the most out of him. He wasn't in the squad on Saturday, I don't believe, but he should be on the bench Saturday if we've signed him recently. So
it'll be an interesting one to see whether or not we see him get any minutes against us down at the bank on Saturday. Certainly will.
If he sorts his attitude out in terms of what Critchley works with him and maybe it's the best out of him like he has done previously with players, then like you said, there could be a player in there. But I for one was definitely surprised to see him actually sign.
Yeah, it'll be, like I say, it'll be really interesting to see whether or not he can live up to any of the sort of pre-Lincoln hype and potential that he maybe had around him. So to kind of look ahead, actually more to Saturday. I'm obviously we've mentioned the fact that you play a 3-5-2, and actually it could maybe be a little bit too negative for what you guys like. But who do you see Lincoln as quite a threat when you're kind of looking down the fixture list now? Do you see Lincoln as this is going to be a really tough game? How are you expecting the game to go, if you like, on Saturday?
I think you've had an exceptional window in terms of the quality you've brought in, a mixture of both experience that you've had in the past with the likes of Walker and the likes of Smith, who you've brought in, who's an excellent proposition in my opinion. I think you've had one of the best windows alongside Oxford. I think you'll pull up some trees this season, and I think you will have a good hunt for playoffs if you continue in the same vein of form with the organisation that Kennedy has brought. So absolutely, and we'll come on to predictions soon. I expect you to be our toughest test so far this season. And yeah, I absolutely got full respect for Lincoln and what they're doing at the moment and the way they've progressed over the last few years.
Yeah, it's funny that you sort of say that, because it's been every preview that I've done so far this season. Basically, every other opposition fan has said something very similar, that actually Lincoln are now a team that they don't. It's no such thing as little old Lincoln anymore. It feels like actually we are a club that people don't want to be playing. We're a club that are doing it right, and we're a club that have harnessed a lot of respect from opposition fans in the league, which is, it's always really nice to hear. It's a really positive thing to be able to hear as a fan of the club. You mentioned predictions, so I guess to kind of wrap it up, for those watching as a little bit of an insight, me and Tom, and along with the rest of the panel of the It's Not Orange podcast, have just done your podcast, haven't we, Tom? And I'm just intrigued as to whether or not you're going to go with the same prediction that you said on there, or you're going to be slightly more optimistic on this one, do you think?
No, I'm not being pessimistic. I just think I'm more of a realist. I think we're going to develop as a team, and hopefully we see different signings, but I expect us to come unstuck. As I've said in the previous podcast, I won't change my opinion on it. It would be a bit weird if I did, if I'm honest, but I think you'll nick it 2-1, a bit similar to what you said. I think you'll either go 2-0 up, because we won't know how to react if you do go 1-0 up. But I expect you to grind out a result against us and maybe teach us a lesson in terms of how we need to change our ways in the future. I'm not doing that thing where it could be one or the other, but I wouldn't be desperately surprised to see us nick a 1-0 in terms of being organised and our previous results being 0-0, to get that goal on the counter and maybe defend it out. I don't see that. I'm going to predict a 2-1 home victory. I wouldn't be surprised if if it was one of those games which was edgy, which we saw against Exeter, and one team nicks it 1-0, but I'll stick with my 2-1 prediction to Lincoln.
Well, I am also going for the exact same thing, for very much the same reasons that you've said. I think we're going to... I think, personally, the game's going to be 1-1 at some point. I think you're going to get a goal, whether that's first or whether that's after we've scored one. And then it'll be up to our tactical changes. I think we'll score a late, not necessarily a late as in a 90th minute, but a reasonably late on in the sort of final third of the game goal, as we have been doing quite a lot recently. We've been able to really make some solid changes. So I'm personally really optimistic for the game. Whether that's a dangerous thing, more than likely is. But no, I'm really looking forward to it. I think it's going to be a really interesting game. It's going to be a real sign of where we are as a club. If we can come out of that game with 10 points after the first 5 matches, it's better than what any of us could have hoped for. So there's definitely a real chance for us to show something on Saturday, as I think there is for you. If you get a win, that's suddenly 2 wins, 3 draws out the first 5 games unbeaten. It's a really positive start from whichever team gets the victory, I think. And if it's a draw, probably the same thing. It's just a really solid kind of start. So it's like a weird early 6-pointer. I'm not saying that we're going to be fighting for a position at the end of the season, but it'll say a lot as to how our fans view our respective starts, I think, depending on the result on Saturday, if you'd agree with that.
Yeah, absolutely. And like I said, it sounds really, I think when our pod comes out, it will sound very negative. I just think we need that personnel, and we need to be a bit more free with what we do. And I'm surprised at the moment with how structured Critchley's trying to be, considering he's trying to play a possession game. He's not done that yet. Yeah. So no criticisms from me. It's just feedback and how we can improve. And I do that by saying where we can be better rather than what we're doing really well. So it'll be interesting to see how organised we stay, and if you do create clear-cut chances like our previous games, and it'll be interesting to see if we can counter you as well and get in behind. But either way, I think if we lose, it kind of solidifies that point I'm trying to make. Yeah. And if we turn up differently and we do a number on you, then it'll be good to see Critchley put his foot down a little bit. But I fully expect a very difficult game, and I fully expect you to probably just pip it.
Well, let's hope that certainly is the case. Thank you so much for coming on, Tom. And please make sure, guys, you go and check out the It's Not Orange podcast. Quite a new podcast, isn't it? Only set up in the summer, if I'm right.
Yeah, July we kicked off, 10th episode with your kind self, this one. So about 32 minutes in for those Lincoln fans who want to hear the preview of our game rather than talking about a Leyton Orient game. But if you want to listen to it all, please feel free. That'd be amazing. And I'll certainly tell Blackpool fans on socials to check this out as well, of course.
Lovely, thank you. And yeah, I'll very much echo that. Please go and check it out. It was really good actually to sit in. Obviously, I was a part of the podcast, but also just to sit in and listen to the Blackpool fans' views. The whole thing was really interesting because it kind of went through obviously their most recent game, but also the kind of the whole start of the season and where they are at the minute as a squad and as a club. So really interesting. Go and make sure to check that out. Again, thank you so much, Tom. Good luck for Saturday and good luck for the rest of the season. And guys, make sure to go check out all the other content. The podcast will have been out last night or tonight, depending on when I actually get this up on YouTube. So yeah, again, content's coming thick and fast. Make sure to check it all out, and up the Imps.